There's a man who wakes up at 5 in the morning every single day. He works 2 jobs, barely sleeps 6 hours, and hasn't taken a vacation in 3 years. His hands are calloused, his back aches, and he's constantly exhausted. Yet when he walks into a room, people barely notice him. Meanwhile, another person strolls in late, works half the hours, and somehow commands instant respect and admiration. This isn't just unfair. It's a psychological phenomenon that reveals something disturbing about how human beings actually assign value to each other. Most people grow up believing in a simple equation: hard work equals respect. Parents tell their children that if they just put in the effort, success and recognition will follow. Teachers reward students who try their hardest. Society celebrates the grind, the hustle, the relentless pursuit of goals. But here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to admit. Hard work alone doesn't earn respect. In fact, in many cases, it actually does the opposite. The hardest workers in any organization are often the most overlooked, the most taken for granted, and the least respected. This isn't a moral judgment about what should be. This is cold psychological reality about what is. The reason for this goes deeper than most people realize. It touches on fundamental aspects of human psychology, social dynamics, and the way our brains are wired to perceive status and value. Understanding why hard work fails to command respect requires dismantling one of the most persistent myths in modern culture, the myth of meritocracy. And once that myth is dismantled, what remains is both liberating and terrifying. Let's start with a concept from psychology called the effort paradox. Research in social perception shows that when people see someone working extremely hard to achieve something, they unconsciously devalue that achievement. Think about it. If someone makes something look easy, people assume it must require exceptional talent or intelligence. But if someone is visibly struggling, sweating, and grinding away, the interpretation changes. The effort becomes evidence that the task is at the edge or beyond their capabilities. The struggle itself signals limitation rather than dedication. This plays out everywhere. A student who studies for weeks and barely passes an exam is seen as less intelligent than a student who doesn't study and gets the same grade. An employee who works overtime every night to complete projects is viewed as less competent than one who finishes the same work during regular hours. A musician who practices obsessively but still makes mistakes is judged more harshly than one who plays effortlessly. The effort paradox means that visible hard work often serves as evidence against someone's abilities rather than for them. But there's something even deeper happening here. Human beings don't actually respect effort. They respect results, but more specifically, they respect results that appear to come naturally. This is rooted in evolutionary psychology. Throughout human history, the individuals who could accomplish difficult tasks with apparent ease were the ones with superior genes, superior intelligence, or superior social positioning. These were the people worth allying with, learning from, or mating with. Someone who had to work twice as hard to achieve half as much was advertising their limitations. The brain learned to read effortless competence as a signal of high value and visible struggle as a signal of low value. This creates a brutal dynamic in modern workplaces and social environments. The person who stays late every night, who volunteers for every difficult task, who never says no and never complains, is not accumulating respect points. They're actually training everyone around them to view their effort as their baseline expectation. Psychologically, people adapt to consistent behaviors and begin to see them as the default rather than as exceptional. The hard worker becomes invisible precisely because their hard work is constant. Meanwhile, the person who sets boundaries, who appears selective about their efforts, and who makes their contributions seem effortless, is accumulating something entirely different. They're creating scarcity, they're demonstrating choice, and they're allowing others to project exceptional ability onto them. This is the dark truth about respect. It's not earned through labor. It's earned through the appearance of having options and the perception of natural superiority. There's a related concept in psychology called the pratfall effect, but it works in reverse here. The pratfall effect suggests that competent people become more likable when they make small mistakes because it humanizes them. But this only applies to people who have already established their competence. For someone who hasn't established high status, visible struggle doesn't humanize them. It confirms suspicions that they don't belong at that level. The person who's already respected can show effort occasionally and be seen as admirably humble. The person who isn't respected yet and shows constant effort is simply confirming their lower status. This is why the hardest working person in any organization is rarely the most promoted. Studies on workplace advancement consistently show that visibility and perception matter far more than actual output. The employee who works quietly and diligently in the background, producing excellent results through sheer determination and long hours, gets passed over for the employee who spends time managing their image, networking, and making sure their contributions are seen by the right people, even if those contributions are objectively smaller. The second employee understands something crucial. Respect is a social phenomenon, not a mechanical one. It's not dispensed by the universe in proportion to effort. It's granted by other people based on their perceptions, biases, and psychological needs. One of the most important psychological needs people have is the need to believe they can accurately judge competence and value. This is where another dark truth emerges. People don't want to believe that success comes primarily from hard work, because that would mean anyone could potentially achieve it. That would flatten social hierarchies and make status feel arbitrary. Instead, people prefer to believe in innate qualities, in talent, in natural gifts. This is called the genius myth, and it serves an important psychological function. It allows people to maintain their belief in a just world where the successful deserve their success not because they worked harder, but because they are fundamentally superior. When someone achieves something through visible hard work, it threatens this belief system. It suggests that the observer could achieve the same thing if they just put in the effort. This creates cognitive dissonance, so the brain resolves this dissonance by devaluing the achievement, by finding reasons why that hard work doesn't really count, or by simply not noticing it at all. The hard worker becomes psychologically invisible because acknowledging them would require uncomfortable self-reflection about one's own choices and potential. This is why stories of overnight success are so appealing, even though they're almost never true. People want to believe in the entrepreneur who had a single brilliant idea and became a billionaire, not the one who worked 18-hour days for a decade. They want to believe in the artist who was discovered by chance, not the one who practiced their craft in obscurity for years. The effortless success story protects everyone's ego. It allows successful people to feel special and unsuccessful people to avoid feeling guilty about their lack of effort. The hard work success story does neither, so it gets ignored or reframed. There's also a class dimension to this that's important to understand. Throughout history, the upper classes have always distinguished themselves by not having to work hard. Visible labor was the mark of the lower classes. The aristocrat, the gentleman, the refined lady, these were people whose status came from not needing to work at all. Their value was inherent, not earned. This cultural programming runs deep. Even in modern meritocratic societies, there's still a lingering association between hard physical or mental labor and lower status. The person who makes their work look effortless signals that they belong to a higher class of person. The person whose work is visibly difficult signals the opposite. This explains why certain professions command more respect than others, regardless of the actual effort involved. A surgeon who performs a complex operation is respected partly because of the life-saving nature of the work, but also because the skill appears to be the result of innate talent and extensive education rather than just hard work. A construction worker who performs physically demanding and dangerous work all day is respected less, even though the effort and risk might be comparable, because the work is perceived as something anyone with a strong body could do. The respect flows to perceived rarity and talent, not to effort or difficulty. But here's where it gets even more psychologically complex. There's a phenomenon called competence signaling that operates independently of actual competence. People are constantly broadcasting signals about their abilities, and others are constantly interpreting those signals. Hard work is actually a weak signal of competence because it's easily faked, and because it can indicate that someone needs to work hard to achieve what others achieve easily. Strong signals of competence include things like confidence, selective effort, quick mastery, and the ability to make complex things seem simple. This is why communication style matters so much in how people are perceived. Someone who explains their work process in exhaustive detail, highlighting all the effort and challenges involved, is actually undermining their own status. They're making the work seem difficult and making themselves seem like they struggled with it. Someone who presents the same work casually, as if it was straightforward, is signaling higher competence even if they struggled just as much behind the scenes. The difference is entirely in the presentation, in the psychological signals being sent. There's also the matter of reciprocity and social exchange theory. When someone works extremely hard for others, whether in a job or in relationships, they're often expecting that this effort will be recognized and reciprocated with respect, appreciation, or reward. But social exchange doesn't work that way. Unasked for favors and efforts often create discomfort rather than gratitude. They can be perceived as manipulation, as attempts to create obligation, or simply as signs of desperation or low self-worth. The person who tries too hard comes across as needy, as though they're overcompensating for a lack of inherent value. This triggers avoidance rather than appreciation. Psychologists have found that people actually respect others more when those others set boundaries and occasionally say no. This seems counterintuitive, but it makes sense through the lens of value signaling. Someone who says yes to everything is signaling that their time and effort have low value, that they're easily available, that they lack other options. Someone who is selective is signaling the opposite. Their yes becomes meaningful because their no exists. Their effort becomes valuable because it's scarce. Respect flows toward perceived value and scarcity, not toward abundant availability and effort. This creates a painful trap for conscientious, hard-working people. They operate from an internalized belief system that says effort should be rewarded, that dedication should be recognized, that doing more than required will lead to advancement and respect. But the external reality operates on completely different principles. The external world is running on status games, perception management, and evolutionary psychology. The mismatch between internal values and external reality leads to burnout, resentment, and confusion about why hard work isn't paying off. The situation is made worse by the fact that organizations and societies publicly praise hard work while privately rewarding something else entirely. Every company claims to value employees who go above and beyond, but the promotions go to those who play politics well and manage their image effectively. Every culture claims to honor the working class, but the actual respect and resources flow to those who don't have to work hard or who can hide their effort. This creates a collective delusion where everyone pretends the system works one way while participating in a system that works completely differently. There's also a gendered dimension to this worth examining. Women and members of minority groups often find that they have to work twice as hard to receive half the recognition, and this is partly because hard work from these groups is expected rather than exceptional. The psychological baseline for what constitutes normal effort is different. When a woman works extremely hard, it's often seen as her just doing her job. When a man does the same work, it's more likely to be seen as going above and beyond. This is rooted in stereotype and expectation bias. The effort that would be remarkable from someone in a privileged category is invisible when it comes from someone in a marginalized category. The respect follows the stereotype, not the actual effort. So what's the solution? The first step is abandoning the idealistic belief that hard work inherently deserves respect. It doesn't. Respect is a social commodity that follows psychological rules, not moral ones. Understanding this is liberating because it means you can stop operating from a framework that doesn't match reality. You can stop resenting the fact that your hard work isn't being recognized and start understanding why recognition works the way it does. The second step is learning to manage perception as actively as you manage output. This isn't about being fake or manipulative. It's about understanding that other people's perception of your value is influenced by how you present yourself, not just by what you actually do. Make your work visible to the right people. Frame your contributions in terms of outcomes and impact rather than effort and process. Let some things look easy even when they weren't. Create boundaries around your time and energy so that your availability becomes valuable rather than taken for granted. The third step is recognizing that respect often comes from what you don't do, as much as from what you do. The ability to say no, to walk away from bad situations, to not need validation from others, these are all high-status behaviors that command more respect than endless accommodation and effort. Paradoxically, caring less about others' respect often leads to receiving more of it, because it signals self-sufficiency and confidence. The fourth step is finding environments and relationships where your values are actually shared. Not every workplace operates purely on perception and status games. Not every social circle is dominated by these dynamics. There are contexts where genuine effort is recognized and where people value substance over image. But these environments are rarer than most people want to believe, and they often exist in smaller, more intimate settings rather than in large organizations or public spheres. Choosing your environment carefully is one of the most important decisions you can make. The final and perhaps most important step is developing an internal source of respect and validation. If your sense of worth is entirely dependent on others recognizing your hard work, you're giving away your power to a system that doesn't operate on the principles you believe in. Building genuine self-respect based on your own values, your own standards, and your own integrity creates a foundation that can't be shaken by the external world's failure to recognize you. This doesn't mean you stop working hard or stop caring about quality. It means you do those things for your own reasons, not because you're expecting the world to reward you fairly. The uncomfortable truth is that hard work is often its own reward, not because it leads to external recognition, but because it can lead to internal growth, skill development, and personal satisfaction. But that's a very different proposition than the one most people were sold. It requires giving up the fantasy of a just world where effort automatically translates to respect and success. It requires accepting that the social world runs on perception, status, and psychological biases that often have nothing to do with who actually deserves what. This doesn't mean hard work is pointless. It means hard work needs to be strategic. It needs to be combined with perception management, with boundary setting, with selective visibility, and with an understanding of the psychological dynamics at play. The person who works smart doesn't just work hard. They work hard on the right things. They make sure the right people know about it. They maintain their boundaries and perceived value, and they don't expect the universe to automatically reward their effort with respect. The people who command the most respect are often those who have mastered this balance. They work hard behind the scenes but make it look easy in public. They're selective about where they deploy their effort. They maintain boundaries that make their time valuable. They understand that respect is something that's granted by others based on perception, not something that's automatically earned through effort. And perhaps most importantly, they've developed an internal sense of worth that isn't dependent on external validation. They can work hard because they choose to, not because they're desperately seeking approval. In the end, the psychology of why hard work doesn't earn respect reveals something fundamental about human nature. People are not rational evaluators of merit. They're social creatures operating on ancient status hierarchies, evolutionary instincts, and cognitive biases. They respect what they perceive as rare, valuable, and superior, not what required the most effort. They grant status to those who seem to have options and natural gifts, not to those who visibly struggle. And they take for granted those who are always available and always working hard, because that's how human psychology evolved to work. Understanding this doesn't have to make you cynical. It can make you realistic. It can free you from the exhausting pursuit of respect through endless effort. It can help you work smarter instead of just harder. And it can help you find or create environments where your values are actually reflected in how people treat each other. The world may not operate on the principles of fairness and meritocracy that we wish it did, but once you understand the principles it actually operates on, you can navigate it much more effectively. And that's worth far more than the false comfort of idealistic beliefs that set you up for disappointment.